Welcome and step into the minds of addiction and recovery. Hello, I'm your host, Brett C. It is an honor to bring into light one of the darkest aspects of our society, addiction. With 20 years of active addiction and 20 years of sobriety, I hope to bring together all listeners on a journey of inspiration and education. With my co-hosts Jared F. and Rich J., we will be sharing our experience, strength, and hope for all listeners to enjoy and have fun with. Now, F3 Recovery brings you the Super Sober Podcast. All right, welcome to the Super Sober Podcast. We're going to be doing a special Mother's Day episode here, and we're going to get right into things as always here on F3 Recovery and the Super Sober Podcast. My name is Brett C. My recovery date is 4/21/03. I'm an RN at BSN. I've been a nurse for up to 17 years. My specialty is in psych and chemical dependency. We'll move right on over to the left.
My name's Rich. My recovery date is October 5th, 2013. My background is in chemical dependency. I worked in treatment centers since about 2014, and then I'm currently in nursing school. And I also I teach boxing at a treatment center as well.
All right, my name's Jared F. My sobriety date is the 4th of July, 2015. And it's good to be back this week. Missed last week because I had my dad and his wife in town, and we got to spend some quality time. But it's really good to be back.
It's good to have you back.
And your qualification, too.
Yeah.
That's right. Okay, so currently my credential, I'm a KDAC 2, and I work in a local hospital here and the treatment of chemical dependency and acute medical detox. And also have a background working as a licensed paramedic, both in Nevada and California, and got a lot of hands-on experience with people that struggle with substance use disorders in that arena too.
Mm-hmm. All right, now that we qualified, we're going to go right into Happy Mother's Day. I mean, we love our mothers, of course. I could probably talk forever about how much my mom means to me and how much she really backed me in the worst times, good times, and especially these times now. When she gets a call from me, it's not something bad or anything. And I'm now on her advanced directive. I am in the conversation to where I wasn't in the conversation at all in my family to now I'm like the medical professional in the family. If something's going to go on, I'm in the conversation usually. And if she goes to the doctors and all those different things, and tomorrow I get to take her out to Mother's Day dinner with my wife and the family. And she's always been there. And she's a very special lady. Her nickname is Janma. So she's been so many people's mothers over the years, and she has a lot of special friends. And um, I don't think my mom's ever really done anything malicious in her life, actually. And so I got a really good foundation of learning from her. But she does have an addictive tendency, though. She loves chocolate and she likes shiny things. So, I mean, to see my mom is to see a whole bunch of jewelry and beautiful things. She likes all the fine things in life, but she does have a tendency. She really loves rocks too, which really didn't translate into any drug rocks or anything like it did for me. But she like has a rock garden in one of our places growing up, and she likes the finer things in life. And yeah, there she is right there. That's my mom.
There
That's
she is.
Jan Ma. So love you, Mom, and I appreciate all the times that you were there for me to help me in my lowest parts when you had no idea what to do with me and no one did, even myself. So today, everything I do in a lot of areas is to pay back. It's that 9-step amends process. No matter how long I am a nurse, no matter how long I stay sober, that's like in the back of my mind. You know, my mom will be, "Oh, can I help you pay for that?" And it's like, no, absolutely not. But she'll sneak in there and she'll pay for different things, of course. And but I got the rest of my life to do that. She's going strong here into her 80s, and I'm super stoked to be able to do that and talk about Mother's Day. And it kind of just came organically right here. Here we are the day before Mother's Day, and Jared was like, "Oh, well, yeah, let's do a Mother's Day thing." And he's got a lot of special things to a letter coming up, and we got pictures of us with our mothers, and So here's my mom with her new iPad that we got, that my brother got her. So we
That's
could
my
put
mom.
all
That's
the
my mom in the back there. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. That's not my mom.
no, that's another family member, Hope, right there. And sorry about the bad little facial expression there, Hope, but maybe we'll pixelate that out. No, I'm just kidding. And so that's an iPad that my brother and the family did, so we can put all of the family photos on there and everything. So she's still learning how to use that. So get kicking on that one, Mom. So appreciate you being there by my side, uh, helping me get out of really gnarly situations when I shouldn't have been helped, and helping take care of our son when I wasn't able to take care of him. And that story can keep going on for a long time. So let's move on to the next mom here to the left.
Well, first and foremost, I just want to say that it's it's. I'm glad that we're doing a Mother's Day kind of special podcast because it reminds me how like what a blessing it is to be able to be present for something like this.
Hmm.
Because as much as I wanted to be for so many years, I was unable to be present for not only Mother's Day, but any holiday, any birthday, anything that really mattered. I was unable to be the son that I wanted to be. And then I carried a lot of shame with that, a lot of guilt with that, and
Absolutely.
that continued to just drive my addiction even further. And so being able to break free from that now is this one of the things. It's one of the reasons why my life, it feels worth it for me to stay clean. I got a million reasons to stay clean,
Hmm.
but this is one of them, is to be able to be present for my mom on Mother's Day and send her a card and
Right.
get it there on time,
Right.
and not take, to be able to give and to be able
Right.
to give of my time, to be able to give of my heart, to be able to just suit up and show up, even though I'm not right next to her.
Right.
She knows that I'm okay and I can make that phone call, and no longer is she not going to hear from me on Mother's Day, or do I no longer do I not have anything to provide on Mother's Day, spiritually. I get to be there and be present, and man, it's such an awesome gift. And so, you know, that's my mom there. That's
Mhm.
me. Um,
I remember in the first podcast, though, you were sharing about a real powerful statement that your mom told you that at least you get to escape.
Mhm.
yeah.
And I know my mom, growing up, it was like, don't tell your mom, because she was always so worried about what was going to go on and everything. So it was like a common scenario within the family, because it was me, my brother, and my dad. So she had these three chaotic characters in her life. And it was like, we didn't want to worry her. So it was like, don't tell your mom, this little kind of whisper in the background. But now, I mean, she's come so far with being able to deal with things, and then after the divorce with my father. So um, she never really had an escape of that. She really pushed through that all, and I know that that really touched me on that first
Yeah, I
podcast.
feel like the moms, they 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 get hit the hardest, I think,
Hmm.
by our addictions, especially with the sons. There's like a different kind of relationship there, and um, my mom, she definitely. I would say if I was to just give one word for my mom, it's resilience. I mean, the amount of shit that she had to deal with, not just with me, but
Right.
my brothers and
Hmm.
my sister. I mean, all of us kids. I was the baby, but all of us kids. And then the final one was me, the one that was still in the house. And what I put her through there at the end was just horrific.
Hmm.
And she never ever lost hope in me. When I lost complete hope in myself and lost complete belief in myself. I mean, we're talking like in the depths of this thing, and she would always be like, "You're meant for something more." She'd be like, "I can't believe like that this is the state you're in because you're meant for something more."
Hmm.
And like now looking back on it, she's always like, "I remember I used to tell you." She's like, I remember I
Yeah.
used to tell you all the time. Like, look at what you're doing. Whenever something happens in my life, or I uh, I accomplish something, she's like, "Remember I used to tell you." And the thing was, is when she used to tell me those things, I just couldn't see it.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, no way. My self-esteem was at an all-time low, and I didn't believe it, but she did, and she not only believed it, she knew it. And I'm just grateful that I'm able to give that back to her now.
Right.
And
Especially on a podcast, she
and
gets to listen to this.
yeah, it's awesome. It's awesome. I get to show that to her today. And so I love you, Mom.
Mm.
I'm grateful. I'm so grateful for all the support through it all. Um, I truly don't know. As much as I look back on our relationship, and sometimes I see some toxic things and stuff that
Mhm.
we know about. Um, as much as I look back on that and I see that, there's a big part of me that says that if 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 you would have just gave up on me or cut me off or whatever, I just don't know how things would have turned out. And so um, I have my ideas of what's healthy and what's not, but I'm grateful the way that everything turned out, and I love you so much. And uh, I'm stoked to come up this summer and see you and spend some time with you and um, just create more memories and be able to suit up and show up for you and the rest of the family. And I love you so much.
On.
Sweet. Here we go.
Yeah. See, this is to me. This is really what being in recovery is all about. Seriously, I mean, talked a little bit on the first episode about what addiction and alcoholism truly is. Is we completely lose the ability to connect to anything and anybody that loves us in a meaningful way. So, uh, flip side of that coin is we do get to experience all the beauty on the other side of
Yeah.
it, which is super cool. Yeah, my mom was here. Let's see, about 2 weeks ago now.
Hmm.
She came down to visit the grandbaby and got to spend some time with her. And at the end of the trip, I got to take her to a sporting goods store here. I came across Hoka's. If anyone,
Oh yeah,
the
oh yeah,
shoe
that's a
brand
good
Hoka.
shoe.
Okay,
It's a
so
good
I,
shoe.
I work in a hospital, so everybody in the hospital wears Hoka's there. And finally, I bought a pair, and I love them. And so I took my mom to the store, and I bought her a pair of Hoka. She tried them on. She's like, "Oh my gosh!" I'm like, "Yes, we're getting those for you. That's your Happy Mother's Day. That's your
Yeah.
gift, right?"
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, this is the other thing that recovery is about is kind of breaking down some of the toxic man rules that fly around
Mm.
out
Yeah.
there. And I got to imagine on this topic at some point today, one of us is going to get vulnerable, probably have some emotions, most likely me, here in a second. But, I think back to all the, I think I was a good baby, and you'll hear that here shortly. But, you know, I turned into a holy terror kind of at a young age, I think. And, I remember at one point when I was 15 years old or so, I had kind of already started in on using some things and wanted to go to a concert. My mom wouldn't let me. So there was a teddy bear that she had bought me when I was a baby that I used to sleep with. And I remember going into her room and I just grabbed it and I tore it in half,
Mm.
threw it back on the bed. And it was like, I remember her going in her room after that and she kind of just locked herself in the room. And yeah, I put her through it for years and years and years. And she showed up no matter how ugly and nasty my behavior was. I always knew that she loved me, and I always knew that she would be there for me the best that she possibly could. And it took its toll. And that's one of the things in addiction that I never stopped to think about. Right? Addiction and alcoholism is such a self-centered um, kind of disorder within the mind that all I could think about was me, and all I could think about is getting what I needed. It didn't matter what I had to do to get it. And the effect that had on everybody that loved me, but specifically her, was pretty horrible. Start finding out later on kind of what that did to her, and it was like she was having sleepless nights.
Right.
You know, and I hear this a lot still with patients that I work with. But when the phone rings, that's like a huge triggering event for our family because they just
Right.
don't know what's going to be on the other end of that line, right? Because we're so unpredictable. They don't know if it's going to be the call that we're dead. They don't know if it's the call that we're in the hospital, that we're in a jail, a prison, whatever.
Right.
So they suffer. My mom became physically ill. This is kind of a trippy thing to think about. She became physically ill based off of what I was doing, right? Which also speaks to a disease concept. Maybe it's contagious. Right. Anyway, so what I brought in today is This is one of the things that my mom showed me. I was up at her house up in the Minden area a few years back, and she brought out my baby book. And this is a letter that she wrote to me August 31st, 1981. I was born June 6th. And it says, "To my baby Jared, you're now almost 3 months old. A good time to begin gathering my thoughts of you. It wasn't too very long ago when you were kicking around in my tummy, making me fat and causing my patience to wear really thin. The anticipation of your arrival is almost unbearable. I'll never forget feeling your daddy and I shared when Dr. Meyer said, 'It's a boy butt.' And then there was the something your little body, the odor your little
Yeah.
body had.
Uh,
I can't read that. Packed after being packed inside of me for so long. The happiness you brought to Daddy and I can't be expressed enough in words. So we are showering you with our love.
Yep.
You're an angel child. You cry only when you're hungry, never to be nasty. Today was the first day you giggled, and the first time you rolled over. You're growing up so fast. I can see changes in you daily. I enjoy so much growing with you, watching your personality develop, and loving you so much. It's hard not to squeeze you too tight. To sum it all up, little guy, you are the most special thing that ever happened to me. And in case you don't know, now I love you. And then on the bottom it says, Mommy, the first time I've written Mommy sure feels good.
That's
So,
nice.
Yeah,
That you have that too and everything. So.
yeah, that she had the wherewithal to write that and then share it with me all these years later. Pretty unbelievable. And you know, I now know the joy of being a parent, and it's just it's so hard for me to imagine. Like, I think about my daughter right now, and you know, the love that I have for her, and then
Yeah, it's
what
kind of
it,
like come full circle.
yeah,
It's
and
like, wow.
and yeah. Anyhow, yeah, and she stayed with me through all of it, and it's freaking incredible. There's no love like I think the mother has for their son.
Right.
I mean, gosh, that's so pure, you know. I remember when I was a baby, or not when I was a baby, but when I was in the depths of my addiction, and I looked at a picture of myself when I was a baby. I was like butt naked in the tub, you know, and I looked at this picture of myself, and I just like burst out in tears because I was blown away on what had happened to me in that
Yeah.
time. I was like, what the hell happened to me? I was just
Yeah.
this pure little life form,
Uh-huh.
ready to tackle whatever.
Mhm.
And then I was looking at myself, and there was probably like a lot of, you know, self pity and stuff in there. You know, it was
Yeah,
a
of
self pity
course.
moment.
Yeah.
It was a pity party moment.
Yeah.
But it stung. It
Mhm.
stung, and I just the shame and guilt that came with the way that I was operating, kind of like what you talked about. I had some behaviors, and some real bad ones. There was some real dark ones, like some stuff that my mom saw.
Mhm.
But I was when I was like a teenager, you know, I stole her car and then got it towed, and you know, and we didn't have any money. We didn't have any money like that. So if
Yeah.
your car gets impounded,
It's a
you
tough
might
one.
not be getting it back, you
Yeah.
know.
It's
And
compounding daily.
yeah, luckily we were able to get that back, but got my license suspended before I ever even had it because I was like 15. So they're like, okay, your license is suspended before you ever even get it.
I
So,
love it.
so there was that, and then in the middle of my addiction, I got her window busted out of her 1987 Chrysler New Yorker, and then we could never replace that because I was taking every bit of money she had and every bit of money I had,
Mhm.
and I was chasing my addiction with that. So we rolled around, okay, Portland, Oregon, where it rains a shitload,
Right.
with a towel in the window for for like I'd say probably a good year. And every time I'd come out in the morning, I'd take the towel and I'd pull it off the window and I'd wring it out, and then I would just throw it, and then I'd just drive through Portland with no window. And then
Come on, get some plexiglass.
dude, and then eventually I totaled that car, the only car that she had. And so then, she was carless after that, and just driven by pure selfishness. Oh, and in the back of the car, the back of that Chrysler New Yorker when I got it totaled was some of our family heirloom crystal that I was on my way to go. I was on my way to go pawn it off,
Yeah.
and it all shattered.
Oh,
And it was just like a metaphor.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, okay, not only did I total the car, but the crystal that I was getting ready to cluck off just got shattered in the
Yeah.
back. Like,
Awful.
man, and so
Try to get crystal with a crystal. Oh man.
just and that's just barely scratching. Dude, the stuff she had to do, me getting in fights and coming home covered in blood, like just
Right.
everything that she had to deal with, and loved me through it all.
Oof.
And supported me through it all, and believed that I was meant for something greater. Is just this is the contrast from what things looked like then to what they look like now, and what I'm willing to do to keep that is so awesome.
Yeah, I feel a new car coming on for Miss Johnson somewhere out there. Yeah, car payment. I heard
Johnson's my
Solomon
dad's name,
going,
Johnson.
"Mhm."
She's a Sheets,
All
polished
right.
Sheets, great woman.
Yeah, that reminded me of something too. Just the
Oh my
I don't know
gosh.
about either one of you guys, but in active addiction, man, I had the worst timing. Worst freaking timing. I'm serious. Anytime it was an important situation, things like, where I was supposed to show up for something, or Mother's Day. I don't even know how many Mother's Days I absolutely nuked, but it's a lot.
Yeah,
And I don't know. I mentioned in the first podcast there, I reached a point where I think I was, my mom had picked me up from somewhere. I thought I was going to her house again. I had nowhere to go, homeless, and thought I was going to her house. And she drove right by her house, and she dropped me off at the Reno Sparks Gospel Mission homeless shelter in
That's
Reno.
awesome.
Yeah,
Mom,
and
this
walked
isn't
away
the front
like
door.
tears in her eyes, and it had to be the most difficult thing in the world for her to do, and yet it had a positive outcome ultimately, right? So I don't know where there's nothing like the grace, at least of my mom. I don't know about your guys's, but the grace that my mom carries and the way she handles things and is just unbelievable. So showed up and learned a lot during my time sober on my first sobriety date.
Mhm.
And I need to talk about this because she was the one that stepped in after my relapse. And I need to talk about kind of what that looked like. And so I was living in Reno. I was working and stuff, and I was having a really difficult time. And she had gotten wind through a family friend that I was not okay.
Mm.
And
And you were hiding the fact that you had relapsed.
Yeah.
She thought you were still sober.
it was the big lie. Yeah.
Oh man.
And she really she had got wind of it, and a mother's intuition, I'm sure she knew for a while probably something wasn't right. But what I was working, I think I was on a 16-hour car or something at the time. So it was like 10 o'clock in the morning, and she lived about an hour or so from Reno. And I got woken up to my wife sleeping next to me. She doesn't know that I had relapsed. And I opened the door, and Mom's standing in the door, and she's crying. And she
Wow.
said, Jerry, I know something's going on, and I'm not leaving here until you get honest. And I deny in front of my wife's like freaking out, like, what is going on? And she came in, and she cornered me. She knew, and I don't know how she knew, but she knew that if I was going to get better again, it would have to start with me and being honest. Okay. If you read some of the literature in some of these 12-step programs, they talk about that.
Yeah.
Right? They talk about it. You can be a complete derelict and still get sober and stay sober if you have the capacity to be honest. If you don't have a
Right.
chance,
It's
right?
the first H in the how of it.
Exactly. And so she jammed me up on that, and then it was a while after that of more continued pain, but she knew I would get better. And the big fear that I had about getting honest about it is what were they going to think? What are the people that love me, or what are they going to think? And the only response that I got from them is Jared, we know you can do this. You've done it before. We just want to help you get back to the person that we know that you are,
Yeah.
right? And it was handled so gracefully, man.
Mm.
But just the bravery to step in like that.
Yeah.
I mean, God bless you, Mom.
Hmm.
Yeah, we definitely got some. Thanks for sharing, guys. We didn't know when we're coming in to do all this stuff. We didn't know what we're gonna share. We don't have bullet points up on the screen right here. We're just free form flowing this one right here about our mothers and everything. So it's a super powerful homage of people that have stuck by us, but not everybody has their families that have stuck by them though.
Mhm.
I mean, when we first get into recovery and things like that, sometimes the relationships can't be reprimanded. Sometimes when we drive out to go on step 9 to make direct amends and do these processes with everybody out there, they're not going to be receptive. Sometimes the mothers have moved on, or sometimes family members have passed away and didn't get to see the men and women that we've become through practicing the 12 steps and through rehabilitation. So
And respect to the people out there that are trying to do this recovery thing, and it's
Yeah.
just you. Maybe dad's not around anymore, maybe mom's not around anymore, because I think about, like, we tell our stories and we talk about the support that we had and the belief that people instilled in us when we didn't believe in ourselves, and they reflect that to us, and somehow that gets to a part of us that motivates us to give it another shot. And so for the people who don't have that,
Mhm.
like, I'm fully aware that there's a lot of people out there that don't have that, and the family becomes the other people in recovery
Yeah.
Right.
that become their family.
Absolutely.
And I can imagine that's a little more difficult. It's a little more not that it wasn't hard for me to get clean. Um, Extremely difficult, hardest thing I've ever
Right.
had to do, but that adds another layer of it when you just don't have those people close to you, your flesh and blood, that are cheering you on. And so
Right.
yeah, 100%, Brad. I
Yeah,
hear what you're saying.
definitely. It's to go through it. There's people out there listening to this podcast that are struggling.
Mhm.
That can't relate because their mothers aren't still around. And what am I going to do to go out there and change these things? And oh, I need to be there for the. I don't have the funds to take my mom out on this. We didn't start like that.
Right.
So we're talking about solidified, or what Jared said, a verified recovery, and we can share our experience, strength, and hope, and we can go down morbid reflection and all that. This is our way to connect with you and to let you know that I personally, like my mother has this nickname Janma. So she was always like a mother to different people and neighbors and stuff like that when growing up, and different friends of mine that didn't really have a mother and father figure. My parents were that. My dad
Right.
was a teacher and a respected teacher in the community, and people loved my parents. They'd come over, and if they needed some direction or guidance, they could get that.
Right.
And so, I mean, I can tell you about other people also that were like father and mother figures towards me in my addiction, that were always loving all of us crazy kids, no matter what. So, and then I moved forward in my recovery, and then now I'm to a point to where, I mean, I got even mentors and what would I call mother figures and stuff that I'm not even, that aren't even alive today, that I listen to their stories and their wisdom, and just become so open minded and so much full of acceptance that I could have these people with me in my heart. My heart was so closed off
Right.
when I got here. It was like the old show Happy Days.
Right.
You remember, if I mean, a lot of the new generation probably doesn't know that one, but Fonzie would, when it came to says I love you, he'd be like, oh, I love you. He couldn't get it out, and that was like me kind of. But my mom was very loving. My dad was very stoic, And I had a, even with my own son, it was this process of me opening up over many years.
Right.
And my hope with this podcast and us sharing this and everything is to fast forward this process, that you can be right where you're at, and then you can open up a little bit, and then not turn this process of recovery into another self-defeating, morbid reflection, a self-destructing vantage point. So it's like, I'm never going to be there where they are. And that's like, it takes time, but to write a letter to your mother, or to take that process, because we always want to jump to step 9. And it's like, and then tell our
Yeah.
families in our 30, 60, or 90-minute recovery story. And it's like, I want to tell everybody right from rehab, I love you, mother, and all that. And that kind of always reminds me to go back to the end of the last podcast, sharing about under promising and over providing, and just to give your parents that peace of mind that you are actually in recovery.
Mhm.
Yeah,
And
sometimes you don't need to do nothing.
yeah,
Just no action
exactly.
is good. Just keep doing what you're doing. If you're just starting on this process to recovery, that's enough right now.
Yeah, it's
And
enough.
and if you have your parents or whoever it is, maybe it's not your parents, maybe you have other people that are supporting you. Hey, at least they can lay their head down at night knowing that you're okay. And
Yeah,
that's enough right now.
yeah.
And we you talked about in our first episode, you talked about how the effect that our addiction has on everybody close to us.
Mhm.
And then the other side of that is the effect that recovery has on everybody that's ever cared about us. And so you talked about different people being like motherly figures or fatherly
Mhm.
figures. I had a lot of that growing up too, like my friends' dads. A
Right,
lot of us were raised by single parents.
right.
So the parents ended up taking all the friends in,
Right,
and just loving on us,
right.
and then maybe to a fault, some of it they co-signed a lot of our bullshit too, but I love being able to see my my friend's parents, who I consider like a second dad, and
Mhm.
and seeing him, like I got to see a friend of mine's dad like a couple months ago, and I hadn't seen him in like probably 15 years. And I got to see him, and he just grabbed me and he hugged me so tight, and I can tell that he was so glad to see me, and I wasn't sure that he was gonna be. And he was so glad to see me, and he just kept talking to me and asking me questions, and it was just such a beautiful thing. And it was one of those moments where I realized, man, I could have missed this.
Right.
I get so many of those. I could have missed this. This is one of
Wow.
those things that if I was still getting loaded, I could have missed it.
Right.
And I'm so grateful that I don't have to miss that kind of stuff anymore. And um, one thing I wanted to say real quick, just on the Mother's Day thing, and there might be some. I'm fully aware there might be some people sitting out there that don't have their mother, or sometimes I think about what would I do if I lost my mother, because it's a real
Mm.
thing. That's
Mhm.
a real thing, and that we have to face in recovery, that we have to
Oh
stay
yeah.
clean through, is the loss of loved ones. And it's a reality, and it's something that's going to happen. And I think often, like, what am I going to do? Am I going to stay clean? And it's pretty easy for me now to not question of whether I'm going to stay clean or not, because what I really think about is, what better way to honor my mother or my father or anybody else that loves and cares about me when they're no longer here than for me to stay clean.
Yeah.
And so if you're a person who's already lost your parents, and you're wondering, like, oh, these guys are all talking about their parents, and there might be some jealousy kicking in, there could be. Here's the thing, is even if they're already gone, at least in my belief, what better way to honor their memory and to honor their legacy than to do what's best for yourself, which is to continue in this process of recovery and make what we call that living amends.
Yeah, I live by a motto: the best way to honor the dead is to live well.
Mm. Like that.
That's what we're doing. I know Jared had another topic he wanted to talk about, which was women and mothers and spirituality, or something
Mm.
like that.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. So I I've kind of always known this,
Mhm.
but um, I don't know. I'm a guy that really struggled with ideas of spirituality, the word God, uh, all kinds of stuff, man. And I really, initially called it luck. Like I had a really good therapist when I got sober, and she helped walk me through some stuff. There's a whole concept, and this is outside of the scope of my practice, but it is my personal experience, so I'll kind of share about it.
No, I like it. I
Um,
want you to share about these things.
yeah,
This is a lot of these things that people don't know. I mean, of course they don't.
yeah,
When I got to know Jared, a lot of his stories and how he facilitates things and communicates with people he helps is these stories that he'll be sharing and stuff. And one of the main reasons why I wanted him on the podcast.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm telling you, I couldn't be more fortunate, and it's like people saw and knew exactly what it was that I needed
Mm.
in order to pull me out of a by all means a hopeless situation. And one of the first things this therapist did is we had some pictures sent of me
Mm.
when I think my mom sent him to the treatment center at the therapist's request. I think 5 years old or 6 years old or something. It was a picture of me. I'll never forget it at Highland Park on a birthday holding a balloon, right? And so you talked about a picture, kind of getting emotional
Oh
over
yeah,
it as a kid.
I know exactly
Yeah.
where you're going with this.
So if I look at me, who I was, or who I had become
Mhm.
before I got sober, and I look at me when I was 5 years old,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, that brought me to tears. Just looking at the picture from
Yep.
where I was at that point brought me to tears. And I did some work on kind of what that was and how to navigate it with the help of this therapist. And so she did this whole idea of inner child work. A lot of, it's at this point, I think a lot of people kind of know about it, but I'll kind
Right.
of explain what she had me do.
Right.
It was super effective. And it was like, she had me look at that kid, get familiar with that kid again, right? Like kind of look at him, feel whatever came up. And then she had me start doing this nightly exercise where she said, I want you to kind of from an aerial standpoint, when you close your eyes, look at that little boy in a situation where he needed an adult to be there and there wasn't one.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it came pretty quickly. It was like there was a period of time growing up where I would come home. I had two older stepbrothers at that time, but it was pretty often I would come home to an empty house. And I remember doing this weird thing, and I don't know where it came from. I can't pinpoint any specific event that triggered it or anything, but when that would happen, what I would do is I'd walk in the door, unlock it, with full of anxiety and fear. I'd walk straight to the kitchen. I'd grab a butcher's knife. I'd go through the entire house, look under the beds, look in the closets, look behind the shower curtains with a knife in my hand and basically clear the house.
And how old are you again at that point?
I must have been in like fourth grade, maybe fifth grade, something like that. Maybe even third grade. I don't know.
I like your choice of weapon, but go ahead.
It was in Santa Rosa, and I don't know what that was about, but that's what came up when she asked me to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the powerful part. She said, here's the exercise. So the exercise was to do this every night before I went to bed. So after I had done everything that I needed to do for the day, I would sit down on the edge of the bed before I went to sleep and do this exercise. So I'd picture that little boy walking into the house. And then the exercise was to picture myself today, my same strength, abilities, build,
Right.
everything.
Your higher self.
Walk over to that little boy, pick him up in my arms, and tell him all the things that he needed to hear. Like, you're safe. I'll protect you. I'll love you. You'll always have everything that you need. And then visually take that kid to a safe place, which was pre-established, which at the time was a beautiful bluff at Salt Point up in Northern California. It's like where the redwood trees come straight out to the ocean.
I knew that's where it'd be.
Yeah.
That's your
I'm
that's
kind
your
of
spot.
crunchy.
Yeah, that's your spot.
A
That's your
little
spot.
bit of a granola cruncher. But anyway, that was the safe place. So it was a really interesting concept, but what it allowed for me to do is essentially to show up.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many different levels of the psyche that are accessed through that exercise,
Right.
but it worked over time. And it was like the grief and shame that you were talking about, right? By the time I showed up to treatment, man, I literally felt like the biggest pile of shit on the face of the planet. You couldn't have felt lower. There was no way I could have felt any lower. And that was all part of the build back up. So it was like all that stuff I used to tell myself, like, yeah, dude, you're a pile. Like you suck. What is wrong with you? Right? To your core, like you are clearly bad. The argument from this therapist was like, would you tell that little boy that same thing? And the answer unequivocally every time is absolutely not. I would never tell that kid that. Right?
Because it's not true.
Not true. So I have this belief that when we enter this world, and I know it to be a fact now, when we enter this world, we're about as close to the way God or whatever the creator is to you intends for us to be as we will ever be.
Right.
We are vulnerable. We have to trust. We have no choice. Right? We cannot feed ourselves. We have to rely on somebody else to do it. We have to trust and believe that they're going to show up and provide everything we need to stay alive. All subconscious, right? We're not thinking, it's not a baby isn't thinking that, right? But when you look at what it really is, that's what it is. And then life happens, right? So whatever your circumstances are, begin to chip away at the purity that every one of us are the second we become an air breather.
Right.
And then eventually we end up in whatever circumstance we're in. And that's a slippery slope. You got to be kind of careful, right? Because it's not just people with addiction issues. I see people all the time. Just general society has a lot of issues surrounding the idea of self and what they are at their core.
Oh, yeah.
You know, so there's a lot of work to be done there. And, you know, at risk of talking too long, I'm going to kind of leave it at that for now. But there's, you know, I did mention at some point I want to talk about this again, but the resistance that I and many other people have getting sober, very typical for someone to enter care, right? Like say, you know, you got a substance use disorder, you enter a detox.
Right.
It's not going to be very long before you walk into a room where inevitably there are 12 steps on a wall and your eyes are going to be directly drawn to the word God. You can't even get
with a capital G.
With a big capital G. Right. The word God. And for many people, and including myself, it was like, oh yeah, I see what this is. We're done here. I'm not not doing that. So there's a whole talk on you know, resistance of spiritual beliefs and ideas. And hey, if that's you, seriously, if that is you and you can relate to that and that's where you're at, please know that you don't have to figure any of that out. You don't have to do anything and you can still get better.
That's it.
Okay. So please just don't run the other way. Right. I had people that stopped me from running the other way. And then they did some interventions with me that allowed that whole process to unfold. And that's again a very long talk on its own. So, but yeah, there's the idea of the inner child, man. If you can get there and don't, you know, I would say if you're gonna do this under the guidance of a therapist, someone that's qualified. Okay, I just shared with you that story because it's something that I went through deeply effective in my life, but that was under supervision and help through all the stuff that came up with that.
Right.
Okay, so you don't want to just go do that on your own. Okay,
I was there for that around that time. We'll get into that another time, but I was there for that. It was cool.
Yeah, I like that
This man
story.
had a 1,000-yard stare. I mean, bummed on life.
Hey, I guess it's a good time. So I guess it's a good time to talk about that. Can we? Yeah.
Yeah,
We can
because
talk
you know what?
about, we can
Because you
talk
know
about
what?
whatever you want to talk
Because you know
about.
what? There's
special Mother's
that's
Day
spiritual.
episode.
Yeah.
This right here, right now, how this has become what it is.
That's true.
It's spiritual and it's interconnected in a way that I can't explain.
Right. No one can. So real quick, what I was just referring to was initiated by my first therapist, though, Lindley at Oasis.
Oh, Oasis, yeah.
But that was my first 8-year stint of sobriety, right? That led to that 8-year stint. where I met this guy was after my relapse. And there's a couple angels out there too I need to mention. So there's a intake person. So that's what she did. That's where I met her, intake, when I was 24 years old. And I talked to her over the phone. Her name is Stacy Creasy, and she got me into Oasis, which is a program in Anaheim that is since now just a male sober living. But she showed up for me in a way when I was down in the dumps, where I felt understood, loved, nurtured, cared for, and she made me know that everything was going to be okay. Okay. So fast forward 8 years, you guys know the relapse story. When I relapsed, we got in touch with Stacy. And Stacy got me, I had nothing. I think I was on Medi-Cal insurance by that time. I had no resources whatsoever. She got me scholarshiped into a detox down in Laguna Beach. And I got to detox there, right? The 4th of July was my sobriety date. And I actually went in on like June 24th or something like that. And I call the 4th of July my sobriety date because I am a raging pill head. And the last time I took any pills in detox that altered my mind, like Suboxone or Ativan, was the 3rd of July. Okay. So my first day without any of those substances was the 4th of July. So that's what I chose to call my sobriety date.
And that's a whole nother kind of topic too, when people often are like, well, what is my sobriety date?
I tell them
it's like when it is, or it's like a lot of the times it's like, well, just pick one and stick with it.
I say, hey, don't even worry about it right now. Just get a year of sobriety, and then you can call your sobriety date at that point, right? Get to a year. Don't even worry about it. So after the detox, I left that detox, had no treatment center to go to. Things were still in shambles. I had nowhere to live. And a guy named Daniel, who I'd known from some meetings that I went to, allowed me to stay on a couch in his room. He was a sober living house manager. They had no beds. I stayed on his couch in his room in Fullerton. And then Stacy was able to get me scholarshiped into an actual program that kept me for like 100 days.
What?
Yeah. It was like a huge scholarship. My family helped with like a little bit financially, what they could afford, basically. They got me into this program. And Rich, this is where I met Rich.
Bam.
Rich was working as a support tech at this program. And
that's awesome.
At that program is where I met my current therapist, Sue. And I don't know how many people I've sent to Sue, basically my whole home group meeting. I don't know, a lot of people I've sent to Sue, but she's a private practice now. But she's the one that did EMDR with me. That's a whole nother discussion on its own. But that modality saved my life.
It sounds like we're segueing into some future guests on the Super Sober podcast.
So
maybe.
many guests.
Just drop some names right now.
There are so many guests, but I mean, it's just like there's weird how people just are in my life that have like saved me multiple times.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it goes like this. He works. Or
Let's hear the real story.
He comes into the place I work. I'm on shift. He's like, I need to go run or do something, and I'm like, all right. So I throw him in the van, and I take him to the gym.
The druggy buggy.
I turn on some Mac Dre, right? He's like, oh, you listen to Mac Dre? I'm like, hell yeah, I listen to Mac Dre. Right. And then we bonded right there over that. And
who doesn't Jared listen to though? I don't know.
And then Jared goes on, gets out of treatment, and the next thing I know, I'm working at a different treatment center. And then all of a sudden, Jared's now working at that treatment center as a counselor. And I'm a support staff, Jared's a counselor. We're working at the same treatment center. The relationship continues to build. Then I start.
So there's no separating you two.
There's not.
No.
Okay.
Then
not even if we wanted to.
I didn't even know this guy's audience out there.
Years go by.
I was wamboozled. Here we go.
Years go by. I start going to nursing school. He's got a medical background. All of a sudden now he's working where he's working, which is a hospital. I'm talking to him about how I need a new sponsor. he goes, and I'm in the middle of this process of going through nursing school, and I just really don't know who to have sponsor me. I was at a place in my recovery where I needed somebody who was kind of living the way I was living or doing what I was doing,
Mhm.
and then he's like, "Oh, I got the perfect guy for you." He's like, "I got this guy. He's a RN." I'm like, come on, okay. So first off, there's not very many male RNs. There's a lot more of them now than there was,
Yeah.
but it used to be like a 1 to 10 ratio, and I'm like, okay, perfect. And so and it's okay. I don't know how many male nurses, male RNs there are in recovery in Orange County. I'm sure there's probably a few,
Hopefully a
but I
lot.
found one. I found one of them, and 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 then so I start calling this guy, and the next thing you know, I'm on a podcast with him and Jared, and I'm looking at this thing going, what? We all got medical backgrounds.
Mhm.
I might end up working at that same hospital because I not only know these two that work there, but I also know a bunch of other people that are actually in my
Mhm.
nursing cohort that work there
Mhm.
that are pulling, begging me to come work there, like
Right.
pulling me to come work there. And it's just one of those things where you look at it and you just go, you just kind of have to laugh because the way things happen,
The way it's scripted,
the way things
it
happen are
couldn't have
just,
been, you
and
could
none of
have
it was forced.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
It all
That's
just,
that's the synchronicity of life when you're
You're in flow.
plugged in,
Yeah.
right? That's how it works, and there's no explaining it.
well, you remember how you were talking about your timing when you were getting high?
Uh-huh.
It's interesting how when we're just doing
It's
bad,
inverse when
when
Yeah.
we
we're
get in
it's like the
recovery.
moral of the story is this: when we're doing bad,
It's like the
bad shit
upside down.
happens.
Yeah.
Bad shit happens. And when we're doing good, good shit happens.
Yeah.
No.
Spiritual stuff,
Yeah. Weird,
powerful
right?
stuff.
They call that where your
Perfect
focus
timing
goes,
happens.
Yeah.
energy flows. And
Yeah.
there's some energy flowing and how that happened. I'm glad you shared that. It came out organically. I didn't know if we were going to segue into sponsorship or anything like that, but that is a whole nother separate, podcast within itself. And it
Mhm.
seems like every podcast we come into, we're talking about future podcasts and everything. But how we're all ended up right here is definitely in getting Solomon as our producer and coming to the podcast place here in Long Beach, California. If they
So
fast
bad.
forward what you want to do and everything, you want to come down here and see Solomon for sure.
This place
Because
is
I
the
would still be
best.
figuring out how to do the other platforms.
Yeah.
And then I
Oh,
ran
dude,
into
we'd
this.
be on a freaking digital camera
It'd be
little thing, dude.
outrageous,
Yeah,
dude.
it'd be horrendous.
We would not.
And the thing is, everybody's doing podcasts.
Yeah.
Everybody's doing podcasts now, but this feels like a podcast.
This is
Yeah,
a real
This
deal.
is the real deal
Yeah.
right here.
Yeah. So I don't even know how much more time we got, but it's definitely I'm glad we got on here and talked about our mothers and we got to know each other. And just to let the audience know, we're still getting to know each other. And the truth is that the longer I stay in recovery and you're not getting to know yourself more, you're not doing the recovery aspect. There's so much more, and there's no ceiling on your spirituality and how much you can really heal. We're talking about uh, things like shadow work, and you'll hear talking about different things. Just know that the process of working the steps is to uncover, discover, and discard.
That's right.
Get back to who we really were before we got piled on with all of this superstitions and other people's problems and the weight of other people's thoughts and people and places and things. And it's just sometimes you just think it's just too much. I can't deal with it. I'm just going to go ahead and anesthetize myself, and then we get to a place where we need to get sober or clean, and it's like you're going to take my main coping skill. If I didn't have this coping skill to move forward where I was at, I don't know if I would have ever made it to where I could have got to a point to where I could get help to get me off of it. And I really, no matter where you are in life, it, there's help. There's so much help out there, and there's so many people able and willing to help, and people want to help. The truth is people like to help and they're willing to help. And man, what powerful
Yeah.
stories today.
And
We
there's a
get
million ways to navigate spirituality. I mean,
Yeah.
if we talk about the importance of spirituality and recovery, and I loved the fact that, and I still love it today, the fact that I get to kind of find my own.
Mhm.
That's so attractive to me, and I have found my own, and I found
Right.
what works for me, and it's not going to be like the traditional spirituality that you hear. It's what's traditional for me. You know, it's what works for me. And so uh, I loved that piece because a lot of us come into recovery and you hear the word God, and usually there's something tied in with that turns you off, that maybe it was shoved down your throat at some point, or um, and it doesn't have to be like that, you know, and it doesn't have to be. I don't have to believe what Brett believes, and I don't have to believe what Jared believes. I get to find my own and kind of create my own based on my personality, based on what works for me. And so the key is at the end of the day, the key is with the spirituality thing. And Jared said, please don't run the other direction
Mhm.
when you hear the word God or hear the word spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
The key is just seeking.
We
That's the
can
key. Because if you just seek, if you're just like, you know what, I'm gonna seek my higher power today. I'm gonna seek spirituality today. It'll show up the way that it's supposed to show up. And so you don't have to have answers. You don't have to have any specific belief. You just have to seek, and it'll become what it's supposed to be for you.
Right.
I think
I think
it's important.
and if we can do like hopefully a full episode or close to it on that topic, I think
Oh yeah, we
is a
will.
good thing. And one thing I would leave the I need to talk about something real quick here,
Yeah.
just on the Mother's Day piece again, and because you mentioned you're talking about your mom and
Mm.
what's going to happen, right, on the
Mm.
inevitable day that they leave this earth and stuff like that.
Going full circle.
I got to
here.
tell you, you can get through anything and stay sober. I see it all the time. People go through some really horrendous stuff in recovery, and they don't get loaded over it, and you don't ever have to
Correct.
get loaded again, no matter what's going on the outside. And you know, I've mentioned a couple of times about my baby, and I need to talk about my wife for a second because my baby entering this world and my wife becoming a mother was one of the gnarliest experiences I've ever gone through
Yeah, I know
in
about
my
that
life.
background too. Of that.
And the situation was is my wife was very, very pregnant. Um, her dad was very, very sick and was in the ICU for
Mm-hmm.
about a month, um, while my wife was very, very pregnant. And I was fielding all the phone calls from the doctors and not
I
knowing
remember.
what was going to go
Mm-hmm.
on with this. And my biggest fear, and it kept going through my head, is like, what is going to happen if Danny dies? That's her dad's name. By the way, this is a guy I have a history with, you know,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, like
Right.
in active disease. I was, you know, I had to make amends to that man, and I got to, thank God. Um, ultimately, what ended up happening though is um, my worst fear came to fruition, and her dad ultimately died. So I drove my wife up to Kaiser up in West LA. This is all during a pandemic too, you know, so
Mm-hmm.
they would only allow one person in at a time. And it was like, I had to argue just to get us both to be able to go in at the same time,
Right.
you know. And my wife got to go up there, and we got to say what we needed to say to her dad. And the next day, um, they moved towards more of a palliative approach and
Mm-hmm.
extubated, and he ended up leaving the earth peacefully. Within 24 hours of that happening, we had a baby shower. Um, the night of the baby shower, my wife's blood pressure went through the roof. We were about a month early, 4 weeks early. Doctor's like, yeah, get down there, go to Hoag. And we got down there and were admitted, and labor was induced. So within 48 hours of my wife's father passing away, my wife delivered our baby. And anyone that's gone through the process of having a child knows like it's pretty gnarly on its own. But with all the added stuff that was going on,
Right.
it was like I have never experienced more emotional extreme polarity in my life. It was like this membrane that I was walking between life and death, and the excitement of watching my wife become a mother and bring a baby into the world, all while processing the loss of her father.
Right.
And so here's where spirituality and maybe a higher power comes in to the picture here. Is at the time I'm going, how could this possibly be happening? Right. And now I see it, right? Like a distance away from it. I started to see it
Right.
about a month after. The timing was actually perfect.
Hmm.
Had it been any different, I don't know that my wife would have been able to pull through it. I don't think anything short of the extreme nature of her birthing a child into the world could have helped her through the pain of losing her dad. And it's perfect timing,
Wow.
even though in the moment it's like there's not a chance in hell I'm seeing that. Right?
This is the worst timing ever,
Yeah.
is what you're thinking,
Yeah.
right?
But here's the thing, and this is about in recovery, this is what we do.
Right.
When that kind of shit is going on, we do nothing. We don't get loaded. We don't move either way. We try to stay neutral. We lean on our spiritual grounding.
And we be there.
And the answers always come.
Right.
And it's always in hindsight where we see it. But all that to say, I grew a new respect and love for my wife that day and through that whole situation. That is the most pure and strong example of a woman and a mother that I've ever seen. And you can't physically be that strong. You can't emotionally be that strong. It's impossible. There has to be something else at play to give that strength, right? And so I'll leave you guys with this. I know we're a little bit over, but one of the things, and I'll leave this for our viewers to consider before we go into talking about spirituality on our next one. Someone told me early on, Jared, you can't be mad at God and not believe there is one at the same time.
Yeah.
So chew on that, and we'll talk some more coming up.
All right. So that's going to wrap up a little bit of something to chew there and going a little bit over, but all right, we got some movies. And
First
we
time using that
also
with it.
want to let you know here at the end of it, we had our mascot sitting here,
It's our
Martell's
boy.
Institution, and Death Guy right here for people that haven't been introduced to it. So at some point down the line, we'll have it all just one little nice package for you. But I think it keeps everybody engaged. So thanks for spending some time. Thanks for getting to know us, and thanks for letting us share our experience, strength, and hope, and our love for our mothers and our. I think everybody just get out there and make a difference in your life and everybody else's too.
Absolutely.
Thanks for letting us do another podcast with you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Super Sober Podcast. Go to our website at f3recovery.org. That's F3Recovery, all one word, .org. We're turning fight, flight, and freeze into free form and flow through practicing the 12 steps and staying accountable to change. Don't forget to keep on keeping on.